He didn't stalk his victims. Not in the way you'd expect. He didn't need to. Because long before they even existed, he'd already buried the murder kits. And when he finally picked a name from the shadows, all he had to do was dig. This is the story of a killer without a type. A killer without a motive. A killer who planned murders the way most people plan vacations. This is the breakdown and analysis of Israel Keyes, the man the FBI still fears had more victims than we'll ever know. Most serial killers have a pattern. A psychological imprint. Something that links their victims. A signature that law enforcement can eventually trace. But Israel Keyes broke that mold entirely. He didn't kill for passion. He didn't kill out of compulsion. He killed because he planned to. And the plan always came first. Let's start with his profile. Israel Keyes, born 1978 in Utah, raised in a survivalist, off-grid religious environment. Notably withdrawn from mainstream society. Early behavioral red flags were present. Animal cruelty, fascination with control, isolation. These traits would later evolve into methodical violence. By adulthood, Keyes had served in the military. Clean record. No red flags. He owned a construction business and was described by neighbors as polite, reserved, and responsible. That social mask is important. It's a common trait in organized killers. Keyes deliberately cultivated normalcy to deflect suspicion. From an investigative standpoint, this made him difficult to profile. He didn't fit the typical mold that law enforcement often relies on to narrow down suspects. Keyes' method was extremely rare in serial crime. Instead of targeting victims impulsively, he pre-staged kill kits across multiple U.S. states. Buckets filled with weapons, restraints, and cleaning supplies, buried years in advance. The kits ensured that no transactions or purchases could ever be tied to the time of the crime. This tells us something crucial. Keyes wasn't just methodical, he was premeditating murder on a national scale, often with no specific victim in mind. He would choose victims later based on opportunity and location. This level of planning indicates organized offender behavior with high criminal sophistication. Confirmed victims include Bill and Lorraine Currier, an older couple abducted from their Vermont home in 2011. There was no clear personal motive. The home was chosen simply because it lacked security systems and had accessible escape routes. Their case went cold for over a year, until Keyes confessed. This highlights a major issue in serial investigations. Without a direct connection between the victim and perpetrator, cases like these often remain unsolved indefinitely. Another case, Samantha Koenig, abducted from a coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska, marked a turning point. Unlike previous victims, she was taken from a public place with surveillance, and her ATM card was used after the crime, leaving a digital footprint. That deviation ultimately led to his arrest. Israel Keyes wasn't caught through forensics. He wasn't turned in by a friend. He was caught because he made a mistake. After abducting and killing Samantha Koenig, Keyes used her debit card to withdraw ransom money across state lines. Law enforcement was able to trace those ATM withdrawals. Surveillance footage revealed a man wearing a disguise, face covered, body posture neutral, but they caught a glimpse of the rental car. The vehicle was tracked to Texas. On March 13, 2012, Texas Highway Patrol pulled him over. What began as a traffic stop ended in the arrest of one of the most elusive serial killers in modern history. Inside the car they found Samantha's ATM card, her phone, a ski mask, a gun, and the same kind of kit Keyes had been hiding across the country. From an investigative standpoint, this was the first major break, but even then law enforcement didn't realize who they had in custody. What happened next was a masterclass in suspect handling, and a chilling example of a killer negotiating his own story. The FBI knew they had enough to connect him to Samantha's murder. But once confronted, Keyes didn't just admit to her death, he offered more. On one condition, media silence. He didn't want the public or his daughter to know what he had done. In over 40 hours of recorded interviews, Keyes described his crimes with clinical detachment. No remorse. No rage. Just facts. He admitted to killing Bill and Lorraine Currier in Vermont. He described in detail how he entered their home, overpowered them, and drove them to an abandoned farmhouse where he executed them. At the time of the murders, no bodies had ever been found. His confession confirmed a previously unsolved double disappearance. But that was only the beginning. He alluded to at least 11 victims, but refused to name them all. His statements were vague, deliberate, and scattered across different states: New York, Washington, Oregon, Texas. In each case, he chose victims randomly and avoided any personal connection. This created a major challenge: verification. With no names, no forensic evidence, and no bodies, the FBI was left with puzzle pieces and no picture. From an analyst perspective, this is where the investigation enters what we call the black hole phase, when the primary source is dead or uncooperative, and law enforcement must work backwards from a limited data set. In cases like these, confirming unknown victims becomes nearly impossible. So how do we classify a killer like Israel Keyes? From a behavioral science perspective, Keyes exhibited traits of an organized, disassociated offender. He compartmentalized his criminal behavior so thoroughly that it never bled into his public life. He had no criminal history, maintained steady employment, functioned as a father, passed background checks. This kind of profile is often overlooked by traditional models of serial offenders. He didn't follow a compulsion loop like Ted Bundy. He wasn't driven by delusions or trauma. He simply found satisfaction in the act of control. His ability to pre-stage crimes with geographic precision indicates a militarized operational mindset: planning, scouting, logistics, execution. And he avoided detection for over a decade by doing what most serial killers don't: he waited. In December 2012, 9 months after his arrest, Israel Keyes was found dead in his jail cell. Suicide. He left a note. Not a confession, not an apology. Just cryptic, disturbing writing, references to death, violence, and dismemberment. For the FBI, his death was devastating. He was the only source who knew the full extent of his crimes. With him gone, so was the possibility of closure for countless families. To this day, law enforcement believes Keyes had many more victims, possibly in the double digits. They've recovered kill kits across several states, some buried as far back as 2004. But without names or bodies, those cases remain open. Israel Keyes wasn't just another serial killer. He was a case study in evolution: how a killer adapts to avoid detection, how he turns randomness into strategy, and how law enforcement must learn to look beyond traditional patterns to catch the most methodical predators. His legacy is one of fear, but also of warning. Because if someone like Keyes could hide for so long, so cleanly, then the real question isn't how many he killed. It's how many more like him are still out there? Israel Keyes didn't stalk a specific type. His victims were not linked by age, gender, race, or profession. That makes victimology nearly impossible, which is exactly how he wanted it. Compare that to killers like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, where victims fit a visible preference. With Keyes, the randomness was intentional. It eliminated predictability and therefore left police without a behavioral trail. In analysis terms, he neutralized one of the most effective profiling tools we have: victim linkage. That strategy puts him in a rare class of offender, alongside names like Israel's own claimed inspiration, Ted Bundy, and perhaps more closely, the Zodiac Killer, who thrived on mystery and elusiveness rather than emotional gratification. When you study the Israel Keyes case, one question keeps coming up: why did it take so long? The truth is, Keyes exploited almost every blind spot in modern investigative systems. First, he avoided patterns. Most serial killers fall into predictable behaviors: same victim type, same weapon, same region. These patterns help analysts connect dots between cases. But Keyes traveled. He changed methods. He chose victims at random. Some he strangled. Some he shot. Some were abducted in daylight. Others were taken in total silence. Second, he operated across jurisdictions. Crimes committed in Vermont, Alaska, Texas, New York. each falling under different local authorities without a central thread connecting them. The lack of federal-level data integration slowed the identification of cross-state behavior. Third, he left no forensic trace. No DNA. No fingerprints. No witnesses. That's not luck, that's planning. This is someone who studied crime scenes, read FBI reports, and understood investigative weaknesses before he even started killing. Bottom line? Keyes succeeded in staying invisible because he treated murder like a career. Not a compulsion. A craft. To their credit, once Israel Keyes was in custody, federal agents quickly recognized the magnitude of who they were dealing with. They changed tactics. Used behavioral analysts to decode his language and timeline. Prioritized silent negotiation to extract more information. Researched missing persons cases that matched his vague geographic references. Launched a nationwide investigation based on his travel and kit locations. The FBI even developed new victim matching models from his travel records, credit card transactions, and known kit sites to identify possible linked disappearances. In short, the Keyes case became a turning point in how law enforcement handles non-patterned serial killers. But it also revealed serious flaws in our national crime infrastructure. There's still no universal case database that syncs real-time missing persons, unsolved murders, and offender profiles across jurisdictions. Rural cases often lack the resources to connect to federal systems unless specifically escalated. Killers like Keyes fall through the cracks because they don't fit behavioral stereotypes. We still rely too heavily on traditional profiling. And most disturbingly, no one was looking for him. There was no task force. No Bolo alert. He was only caught because he slipped, not because the system spotted him. That's a haunting realization for investigators. If Israel Keyes hadn't made a mistake, he might still be out there. Another unusual element of this case was the temporary media blackout requested by Keyes, and honored by the FBI. Why does that matter? Typically, media involvement helps identify other victims. It raises public awareness. Families come forward. Patterns emerge. But in this case, Keyes demanded silence to protect his daughter's image of him. And for a time the FBI complied. That choice, while understandable, may have delayed or even prevented victim identification. It raises tough questions. Do killers deserve privacy even in death? Should investigators ever trade information for cooperation? In hindsight, many argue that the blackout helped Keyes retain control, one final manipulation from behind bars. As crime analysts, we're trained to look for patterns. Keyes forces us to rethink that approach. What if the most dangerous killers don't leave patterns? What if they're educated, rational, and operating like ghost operatives, quiet, clean, and methodical? This case isn't just about Israel Keyes. It's about the blind spots in how we define, detect, and pursue serial offenders. And that leads to the final, most chilling thought. There are likely others. The public reaction to the Israel Keyes case was one of quiet horror. Unlike other serial killers, there were no lurid photos, no shocking courtroom theatrics, no narcissistic media displays. Just a blank stare. A man in a jail cell. And a list of victims we still can't name. For the families of the missing, his death closed the door on answers. And to this day, the FBI maintains a public request for tips related to his travels and possible victims between 2001 and 2012. Because the full story hasn't been written. And probably never will be. Despite Keyes' death in 2012, the FBI continues to investigate his movements. To date, they've released maps of his travel paths, lists of car rentals, and locations of known kill kits. The agency believes several kits remain unrecovered. They've also asked the public for help identifying two unidentified victims Keyes hinted at. One believed to be a teenage girl from the East Coast, the other possibly linked to a missing person case out of Washington state. This ongoing investigation is unique. It's not about catching a killer, it's about catching up to one. As investigators, we rely on facts. But cases like this remind us that facts don't always bring closure. So here's the hard truth. Israel Keys taught us that the scariest killers aren't always the loudest, the most violent, or the most obvious. Sometimes they're the ones who wait, who study, who walk among us like anyone else. And that should scare us far more than any headline ever could. So what do you think? Should the FBI have released more to the public earlier? Do you think Keys had more victims, possibly in double or triple digits? And could someone like him exist today, traveling freely, killing methodically, and never getting caught? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive criminal analyses just like this one.